Zig coming in on the top. Today on the show, we have Evan Taylor, a multi-instrumentalist, producer, and orchestra bandleader for the Bernie Worrell Orchestra. Now, Evan's worked with a bunch of groups and a bunch of amazing artists, but today we're going to hone in on Bernie Worrell because his most recent project has been finishing Bernie's last record, orchestrating it, finding people to play on it, putting it all together. The album's called Bernie Worrell, Wave from the WOOniverse, and it's a star-studded lineup on this record. I'm going to name a few of them. Got Bootsy Collins, Sean Ono Lennon, Jerry Harrison, Fred Schneider from the B-52s, Mark Ribot, Norwood Fisher, Mike Watt, and that's just scratching the surface of the amazing lineup on this album. And it also features an unreleased funkadelic track called Contusion. Now, behind all this craziness is Evan, getting to work with some of the masters and putting together this beautiful tribute to Bernie. The album Wave from the WOOniverse is available now on all streaming platforms. There's some cool vinyls out there. It was initially released as a Record Store Day exclusive, but now you can find it everywhere and for good cause, or for good reason, because it's an incredible record. Evan does a lot of other projects. He's got his studio, Loantaka, that he's running. He's also a singer-songwriter, and he has his own solo career, and he's been working with a duo called Purple Witch of Culver, which is available on all the streaming platforms as well. We're going to jump right into this interview, friends, because it goes deep, and it's a really unique and personal insight to working and living with Bernie Worrell. So before we do that, if you hear what you like, if you can like, rate, review, subscribe to the podcast and any of the podcast platforms, it helps me keep talking to cool guests like Evan and sharing their insight with you. So now, without further ado, here is my conversation with Evan Taylor. I wanted to, you have, a vast, when you're doing work like you're doing that's kind of behind the scenes, you're it's a whole different mind, a whole different, headspace. From what I understand, just even recording stuff, working with people, when you're recording, it's a whole nother that person has a whole nother view of kind of guiding someone as opposed to kind of manning the ship in a way. So I kind of wanted to work our way up to that. Now, correct me if I'm wrong, but you came from a family with music in it, and your sister was pretty good at piano, right?
Not really, actually. She could play, pluck out a little bit by ear, and she, played cello. My family is not musical at all, actually. They come mostly from the social sciences. My dad is a psychiatrist, or is still a psychiatrist, and my mom was a social worker for a while, and that's how they kind of connected. So actually, a lot of my production methods, I think, were dictated by some of those ideas and interpersonal understandings between people, and that even goes to the level of counseling and being able to read people, and that's really where the kind of production ability came from. The music, my family was very supportive of my music. They got me my first drum set, and drove me to gigs when I was young, and they were there for me. But yeah, I think my dad attempted to learn accordion as a kid, and it didn't work out. But I don't know. That's folklore.
That's a tough instrument, man. That's not an easy one to figure out. Just physically, and it pulls on your chest. You're leaning forward. It gives you bad posture for sure. But the kind of I definitely agree with because I feel most anyone that's kind of directing behind the scenes of a thing is that kind of almost therapeutic approach to kind of because when you're recording and that red light's on, it's I fucked up that take, let me do it again, or hold on, I said the word the backwards, or I don't know, you get so in your head, and so you can totally tunnel vision and spiral out, and it's a very vulnerable place to be in. you know?
Yes.
So it takes for me personally, it took me a long time to find someone where I can work with and like be like, all right, completely fucking up, you know, and just wrecking it. And like, but in like on the other end of it, because I've had recently, a friend of mine asked me to help them figure out some vocal takes. And like, I've spent a long time listening to myself and trying to figure it out. And I'm sure you have as well. Like, you know what I mean? You get to that point where it's like, I sound like this, I can navigate that. But I've never been asked to help someone with that before. So I kind of found myself in that other position and like looking at him like, no, it's right there. It's there. It's there. It's just that one, it started sour or whatever. You know what I mean? Like, it was a completely different perspective shift for me. But that natural kind of like, you just wanted to like support, like, you got this. You know what I mean? That was a long-winded way to ask you more about that.
Yeah. It's interesting because, I mean, first of all, like, I think with production, especially when you have a number of people, or actually not even a number of people, it could just be like one person, you have to create that safe space that allows for triumphs and tragedies. And hopefully we recover from these tragedies, but they're all lessons. Because, you know, we've had, and I'm sure, you know, you're a professional musician. You've had those times where you walk out of the studio and you're like, man, I did not get what I wanted. And then you come back another day and clean up a few things, maybe change a few voicings, whatever, and you're cooking, you know, like. And I actually had like a moment 2 days ago where I was like, I'm going to finish a song of like my own material that I've been like, you know, just like I had shelved for a minute, and I'm like, okay, all I have left is laying down a vocal, and I didn't have any lyrics. And a lot of the time I like to write on the spot. I like to get a coffee with 2 shots of espresso and just write. And it kind of gets me out of being so self-conscious about everything I write. I just kind of go like stream of consciousness with a little more restraint. And I listened back to it, and I was just like, oh man, I was just like not focusing on what I tell people to focus on, because I was in a different seat, and I was being too focused on being verbose and kind of like telling the story without doing it in a more poetic way that fit the stanzas. And it felt a little forced, except I really liked the tone of my voice. So I was like, oh, like, that's kind of like, I wouldn't call it a tragedy, but it was just like, oh, that was a really good day for my voice, but I just wasn't happy with the lyrical content. But it's, for me, like, you know, that's like self-production, and self-production is like a whole different like ball game. But with other people, you know, you can stop them and be like, okay, take a deep breath. And, you know, that line you wrote is lovely. It's gorgeous, but it trails off into the next part. And then you have to take this big breath, and then you're off by, you know, like a quarter note or whatever. I guess that's a big note to be off by, but
Yeah.
you're
16th.
yeah, you're off by a 16th note, and then you're in this whole different world where you offset this this moment where people were dialed in. So I think that like production is about like kind of this like being able to perform with abandon. I really think it is. And I think the players that I've worked with who really have it down, like especially the kind of session people brought in and everything, they just lose that self-conscious side or that ego or the necessity to be recognized or special or the center of attention, and they just serve this song. And you know about that. I mean, we're speaking the same language here, like just like the classic serving the song, like, you know, like some of my favorite musicians, like as a drummer, like Jim Keltner, for instance, is like someone who serves the song, you know.
Yeah.
It's or, you know, Carol Kay on bass, but it's the list goes on. But yeah, it's all a big, expansive I think process of getting people on the same wavelength, and that requires respect. It requires mutual respect from people, and you can assemble things with people who don't respect people, but it involves a lot of surgery, and it does not sit in the pocket like when people really are focused on the same like collective goal.
I definitely agree with that. Like, it's into trying to get someone to buy in a little bit. It's a whole nother like kind of emotional battle to what's already a vulnerable kind of place. One thing I really like relate to, is the double shot of espresso, and like the just how your mind races. Like, I've recently stopped drinking coffee, and like because I kept losing my voice. I kept losing like my head voice, and like it was just, you know what I mean, like and like my day gig, like I was saying, is like I teach, so I'm up at like 5 o'clock. You know what I mean? Like caffeine is the only thing that keeps me going. Yeah. So I gave up coffee, and like, but the one thing I do miss about it is like there's a certain point when you're just like driving or writing or in front of a thing, and you've had enough, like a whole cup of like whole cold brew or something like highly caffeinated, and those ideas just start pouring out. You're like, ah.
Yeah, I mean, it's funny how they can do that. Like we have this kind of policy at Studio G in Greenpoint, where we did a lot of the Bernie record, where it's like you start with a coffee and then you switch to tea before you get too jacked up. And like, so like, you know, and I've always made the mistake of like, it's funny. I started drinking, I don't know, we're in a whole different topic now.
That's fine.
I started drinking coffee really late in my life. Yeah. Like I started like late 20s drinking coffee, and I would go to the studio and just like drink cup after cup, like, oh, this stuff is great. This stuff is great. And like, and then I would start playing and be like, oh my God, like I can't do anything. But it's, you know, it's, I would say at least like, you know, it's, I wish I could quit the coffee too, because I think that like sometimes, like, I mean, like all substances, you get sometimes a false sense of your, I don't know, the quality of your work.
Right. Well, you just get that dependent thing. Like, hold on, I need a cup before doing this, and like. It definitely was not fun to quit. Those morning headaches are real, but I kind of fell in the tea, so I don't know how far I went, but but yeah, it's that's it. I kind of got into it late too in life as well. Like I think 19, like, which is still pretty early.
Yeah,
but so now the studio, you said it was Studio G?
Yeah, Studio G is where we did our East Coast sessions.
And is that not your studio?
That's not my studio. That's
Loantaka?
That's my studio. And Studio G is owned by Tony Mamoni and Joel Hamilton. And they just have like a hell of a studio. It's fucking sick. But yeah, I have a spot downtown LA, and we did a lot of work there to also like shout out to Pale Moon, which is in Cambridge, New York. That's Jared Samuel Eliaseff's studio, who is a co-producer and writer on the album as well, and got a session player. Yeah, we had some cool studios developed, and actually a number of other remote studios were used that I don't even know what they look like, but I just imagine these very cool little studios and home studios. And it was recorded in apartments. It was recorded I have friends who dropped in parts in an apartment. Yeah, it was a really huge collective effort.
Yeah, so I guess the dive into the universe of Woo record. Now, you were touring with Bernie before, right?
Yeah.
So so I get you're playing piano and drums, a little bit piano, or mostly drums?
Mostly drums on tour.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. So at what point does your paths cross?
It started during the Standards album, which basically the way it worked was I kind of had the backing of a label, and we were brainstorming, ideas of kind of interesting projects. And I just pitched, like, have you guys worked with Bernie Worrell before? And I think the answer was, like, possibly. He made a guest appearance on a record, but not a formal album. And I reached out to his manager and wife and kind of stated my case. As I said, I wanted to make a record with Bernie, and she said, that is not an idea. She's like, sure, you and everyone else. So I kind of tried to come up with a concept that would be something that we could, because I was still living in LA, and he was in New Jersey, and I was trying to think of something that would be easy and we wouldn't have to write so much, and the publishing would be easy. So I thought of just doing like a funky jazz standards record, and it was a good introduction to working with Bernie. We got together for some pre-production. We bounced around ideas for arrangements. And it was, it received mixed reviews. I think that the reality is people wanted to hear Bernie playing like P-funk style funk, and they're not really into the jazz attempt. And I know that there's some people from the jazz world who are like, don't play fake jazz. And then there are people from the funk world who are like, please play funk. And then it's funny because after like years have gone by, and I've kind of like, I wouldn't say like ever disowned that record, but I just kind of like distanced myself from it. A bunch of people have popped up saying that they've really enjoyed it. So, so that's cool. And that's the nature of record making. We have our records that we, at the time I was very excited about it, but then it just, it didn't take off like I wanted it to. But that was our introduction. And after that, we decided that we wanted to create an ensemble to kind of take it on the road. So we had like one lineup that we did a show with, and then we're trying to negotiate all these things like European tours and stuff like that, and they're saying the band is too big, and things just didn't work out. So there was a lull for a number of months. Nothing was happening. I went back to I think I was also teaching too. I was like mostly doing that. And I don't know, I'm a horrible teacher, but
I doubt that, man. I doubt that. Just
oh, you'd be surprised. And then eventually, I think we discussed the idea again and how we could make it work. And we kind of looked over the budget, looked over how we could configure it, and got a new lineup together that played music from all of Bernie's career, not just the Standards album. And that was a lot more attractive to people. So we ended up keeping that lineup for the majority of the run with that band. It started out as a 10-piece band. It was 2 guitars, 3 horns, 2 drum sets, percussion, keys. Am I doing my math right? Am I up to 10 yet?
Bass?
Bass, yes, of course. There needs to be a bass. Yeah, well, let's just say that's 10. It was great. I mean, I feel like we would have we did kind of like a little residency kind of style thing in New York, where we would bring special guests. We had like Jimmy Destri from Blondie. We had Gary Lucas from Jeff Buckley, and also Captain Beefheart. Yeah. And just a number of cool people would show up and sit in with us. Also, we did out of state a show with Chris France and Tina Weymouth and Steve Scales. We did a show with Jerry Harrison. So it became this whole thing of like, if you come to our show, someone's going to show up as a special guest. And that kind of made it take off a little more. And then eventually we started doing national tours, and then it just built from there. But that's really how it worked out. It was weird because there was this point where I was trying to do Standards Volume 2 because I was trying to figure out another record we could make. And we met with a record label, I won't mention their name, and they acted very enthusiastic about it, just to the point where they were like, we're going to sign this, and this is what it is. And I remember being in the car with Bernie, driving back from this meeting in New York, and being really enthusiastic. And then then I kept calling, and they wouldn't put me through to the main A&R guy. And then finally he's just like, okay, I'm going to let you know something. He's like, one of our interns, I said Bernie Worrell, and she said, who's that? And I realized this is not a good deal. And I was just like, really? Okay, well, that is a bummer. And I was really, really bummed. But that kind of lit the fire with everything. That came before Bernie Worrell Orchestra, so that like kind of lit the fire where it's like, we need to do something to get this music out there and to get Bernie out there. We need to fucking do something. And we all came together and did it. And we actually rehearsed at my parents' house.
Yeah, that's awesome. Hey, Mom, this is Bernie Worrell. He was he was in Parliament, Funkadelic, and anyway.
Yeah, I mean that's what it was like. He would hang out, like, and just like smoke cigarettes outside, and my mom would bring him like cherries and stuff like that, and he'd be like it's like it was adorable.
That's sick. That's so cool. So, I had a couple, like, with that initial pitch. So Standards 1, the Standards record, it got through to him. So it got, like, was it like was he into that right away, or was it more like kind of logistics, moving stuff, and then was into it?
Yeah, a lot of it was logistics at that point, because I think that like the nature of people asking to work with Bernie, and Judy Worrell can correct me if I'm wrong, but the nature of it is, a lot of people wanted him for guest appearances, and there are a lot of people with ideas, and and I kind of needed to be vetted to then be passed off to Bernie. And I sent records over of stuff that I've worked on, and I tried to. I think there are some musicians I wanted on there, and I had them play some stuff that I thought was in the vein of what would be good for the record, and sent recordings over, and really tried to state my case before I was really given his cell number. But it was a process of vetting, because there were always so many people who wanted him for something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that makes sense. Like, and like getting ready to talk with you, I dove more into, like, I remember years ago listening to interviews, but I kind of refreshed myself on interviews with Bernie, and he really seemed like the type of guy of, like, music is music. You know what I mean? Like, genre, like, kind of like Mike Watt. What's genre? What is genre? You know what I mean? Like, which will put a pin in Watt, because I know you worked with him as well.
Yeah.
But you know what I mean? Like, so he really seemed like this kind of, like, it's all one thing. So, and knowing he came from, like, a classically trained background, when you're working on these standards and, like, reharmonizing and reorchestrating, what was his kind of typical, like, approach to a standard that he would shift it to make it the Bernie approach to it?
Well,
or a few ideas, because I'm sure it's not one consistent thing.
It was kind of funny because, when we were reading the like lead sheets, some of the extensions and stuff, he's like, oh, those always get me. And it's because he was so used to reading classical notation. And but he always heard the extensions and knew exactly what the formations were.
Right. And everything. He had, like, perfect pitch, right?
Yeah, he had perfect pitch. Yeah. So he like knew exactly, like, he had all the voicings down, but, like, when he would see it on a page, sometimes he'd be like, it's probably easier for him to just see it written out. But he would bring a little keyboard. It was a Kawai keyboard. The model escapes me now. I got one. And it's in my studio somewhere, but he had this little quad keyboard they actually toured with, and had built-in speakers and everything. And he'd come over, and he would just pull up a sound, and I think we were doing, like, All the Things You Are, and I was like, hey, how about we split it? Like, the A section can be something funky, and then B section I'll do, like, a mambo kind of thing. And then he just, like, got a bass sound and started playing, like, some synth bass. And then my favorite, and the song that did the best on the record was Watermelon Man, where he just started this clavinet groove. And it was kind of cool, like, to hear him do, like, a Herbie song. It was like, it's like, two great kind of clav players, but that one did well. I think it, like, charted in, like, this is something, again, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, but it charted in, like, Belgium. Yeah, that was a fun one. But yeah, like, with, like, the reharming and stuff, a lot of it happened on the spot, because we brought in the musicians, and everyone kind of did their thing. And there's this cool moment where Ronnie Drayden, who since has passed, it was on that song, Watermelon Man, and he was kind of playing this thing, and then he stopped one of the junior members of the lineup, who ended up being the lead guitarist of Bernie Worrell Orchestra. But it was his first time on a Bernie Worrell Orchestra or Bernie Worrell gig, and he stopped him in front of like everyone, and it was like one of those moments that, like, you know, it's like, oh shit, what's gonna happen? And he's like, man, you need to play like a different kind of thing. And he's like, well, you know, what is it? And there's like this whole like discussion, and he's like, no, man, you can't just like play the chords. You can't play the chords. You have to play. And then he's just like, you know, play like a, and then like Ronnie played this, he answered it, and then like they suddenly were working together. It was like, and it was like, and they got like this just machine working, and it was like, it was kind of funny because we were in the elevator. This was at Dubway Studios in Chelsea, New York, and in Manhattan, and we were in the elevator, and I remember one of the owners said to the junior guitarist, well, I'll just call him out because he's a great guitarist, Andrew Kimball, the junior guitarist, but he's an excellent guitarist. He said, he's like, oh yeah, you had one of those moments. He's like, I had one of those with a reggae band once where they called me out on like, you know, a part like that. And it's like, and I got that too. Like I got that from, there is like a double drum. We often had double drums. So then we kind of stopped for a little bit, but then we had like a run of like, I think 3 or 4 dates where we had, a run of drums with like one of the P-Funk drummers, and he totally schooled me in like in front of the audience. and I was just like, oh god, man, like it wasn't like, but then, you know, I'm like a groove player, like I'm not like, you know, I don't really do much chopsy kind of stuff because I'm a multi-instrumentalist, you know, I'm not like really like I'm a drummer, but like I'm a groove drummer. And then like I think Bernie was having us like trade fours or whatever, and I was like, after that show, I was like, Bernie, do not have me ever do that again, because like, you know, this dude's like ripping on everything, and then like I'm like trying to keep up and trying to play, and then like we're in like Lexington, Kentucky, and like Jim James from My Morning Jacket is like front row, and it was just like,
shit, yeah.
I was just like, dude, this is too intense for me.
But I mean, like, because I could, I'm having flashbacks, man. I'm thinking, I played in this fusion group, and there was some, because my main's guitar, and there was some like syncopated like 16th groove that I was just not getting at that point, and like, you know, luckily it wasn't at a show or with like a Legends, like it was nowhere near as deep of a burn as your experience, but like those things like stick in your craw, and you're like, ah, but they are good learning points too. I think coming from like a production background, like that makes sense that your style of drumming would be kind of groove based to support the like how we said earlier, to support the song, and like as far as just like setting a platform to build off of, the groove is really what's going to do that.
Yeah, I mean, generally, I don't spend that long on drums when I'm in the studio, because I'm usually trying to get around all the instruments to build at least a track to work from, so maybe a singer can have something to have a reference. So yeah, everything like is song based, and I would say that like with Bernie in the studio, he was very song based too. In the studio, live he would go out into outer space and jam and go crazy, but in the studio he was more like talking headsy, like he, you know, with just like little like tasty lines and stuff like that, and like not trying to like dominate the field. And at that point in my production career, I was always trying to push him to do more and show and like play more clavinet, play more of this. And one time I was just like, can't you just do like a nasty clav riff the whole time? He's like, if I'm going to do anything on the clav, I'm going to go, did. I was like, and I eventually got it. I was like, yes, that would be the move. And then like, I think if you listen to like Stop Making Sense, Making Flippy Floppy, this is like really great. Like when they hit the chorus, I think it's the second time around, he goes did on the Prophet 5, and it's just like, it's so like subtle and tasty, and it's just like, it's like he was very much like that in the studio, and that's why he complimented so many people in the studio throughout his career. But yeah, I would say that I was the same in the studio. It's just like, you know, getting an idea down, making it feel good, like having the song feel good. And that's what like kind of my approach is. But like working with Bernie Worrell Orchestra, I definitely built the ability to, even though I wasn't like a chopsy player, I was able to jam and like hold my own and stretch out a lot, which took me a little bit of time to get comfortable being willing to take those risks.
Well, yeah, I gotta imagine, especially being around players like who you're playing with, you know, it's like hanging out with the cool crowd. I want to be accepted and not biff this. You know what I mean? So that totally makes sense. But like, it's so interesting. Like it goes back to like the masters always being like, it must be calm. You know what I mean? Like the Miyagi's and like the I'm trying to think, you know, the smooth and the simple things that bring out this whole picture that when you first start playing, it's not the thing you listen to, but it's the thing you feel.
Yes.
So so when you guys started, okay, so now when it evolved and you're playing in New York and you have like this weekly, what do they call it? Weekly gig, and you're like and people are subbing in. So that makes sense why the Talking Heads crew is coming in. Now, when I was reading your bio, it said that you worked. Was this when you're working with each Talking Head member and different projects? Was it mostly coming in and sitting with Bernie, or did you also record with those guys on different projects as well?
I didn't record with them. It was mostly live.
Okay.
I'm trying to think of like what they were doing. If Chris and Tina were doing Tom Tom Club at that point, I think they might have been. I'm not sure what they were up to, and I think that I think Jerry was mostly producing.
Okay.
At that point, not really playing out. I mean, he's playing out a lot now with Adrian Ballou.
Yeah, they're coming to Cleveland this weekend. I'm like, shit, like, or next weekend.
Nice. Where are they playing?
Agora. Yeah, huge venue, man. Like,
cool.
Yeah, super cool.
Good for Jerry. Yeah, cool.
But okay. So like so this was live situations.
Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. I forgot Bernie worked with them as well. Like, but it makes perfect sense musically.
Yeah. Yeah, he worked pretty extensively though. Yeah.
Okay, so like when you got this weekly gig and like people are just popping in, and like at that point, was that kind of what Bernie was looking to do, or was this all kind of snowballing into this big thing before it became the orchestra?
No, the orchestra was basically like established at that point, and I was really the one doing the outreach for inviting people in.
Okay, cool.
And Bernie liked that because it kept things really interesting for him. And I think it was also like a reverse of like, you know, usually people are always bringing Bernie in as the guest who has to sit in, and finally like he had the band and people were coming to him. And I think it just like that reversal, I think I wouldn't say it like meant something to him because I'm not going to put words in his mouth, but like I think that it was just it was nice to see people coming out. Because we really had like a number of special nights that were sometimes just unpredictable. You know, we didn't rehearse with these people. We just try things out. Bootsy came one night, and that was our second show. Bootsy came out.
Oh wow!
It was I think the special guests were Smokey Hormel did like the first half of the set, and then Bootsy, he was supposed to do one song, and we rehearsed that one song, and then he went into a bunch of other songs that we had not rehearsed. And then, like, you know, so everyone's trying to figure out like the changes, and I'm not really sure what happened. Maybe he thought that we were just playing P-Funk songs already, or if he was just had faith in us. And but I think it ended with him walking on tables and running out the door into a SUV with tinted windows.
That's so sick.
Yeah, it was at the bitter end in the Village in New York, which is, it's so funny. It was like a folk venue pretty much, you know, like, and, and we just like last minute we're like, oh, Bootsy's in town, let's book a show. Yeah.
That's so sick. That's so cool. Like, I mean, and it's so cool, like, because each of those guys got their own thing going on. It's so cool that they still are willing to support each other too. So, like, did you reach out at that point to Bootsy? Like, because if you're pulling people in, was that you like, yo, Bootsy's management, what's going on?
Well, Bootsy, I think that was Judy Worrell just directly called Bootsy.
Oh, okay.
Or Bernie did. I think, yeah, like, you know, they're tight. They were. I think, well, it was a George Clinton Lifetime Achievement Award ceremony in New York at the Apollo, and like a bunch of people were in town. So Bootsy came out. It was definitely trippy because they're like Bootsy had a tech, and I think he was talking to our bass player Scott Hogan and asking like, do you have any extra cabs? And he's like, yeah, I have some. He's like, I can bring an extra cab. He's like, do you have two? And he's like, yes. He's like, bring them both. and like we're gonna need, like, you know, some stuff for Bootsy, some heavy ampage.
That's crazy.
It was fun.
Was he just like it like super loud, or is it just, he usually plays really, really loud. It's pretty cool. That's so sick. Whoa. So okay. So like, as this is going on, and like then it takes off to the next level, I guess. Like, so working on material after this record with Bernie, what did that look like? Kind of that same idea with kind of pitching ideas, like maybe a standard, you know what I mean? Like, was that kind of you pitching ideas and him, or was it at one point switched around where he's pitching you ideas to track?
By the time the orchestra was established, we were all writing together.
Okay.
And a lot of it was, you know, on the spot. I think later on people started kind of bringing in sketches. Once we kind of like had the confidence of like, okay, you know, we're going to keep doing this, you know, we can write for this project. Yeah, a lot of it was like us kind of in a room, like trying different things out, and then we would do them live and see how they went over. And yeah, if they seemed to groove well, we would record them. And yeah, it was a pretty fun process. All kind of getting together and doing it. And we had like very modest means at that point. We weren't really in big studios. We didn't have a label. It was hard to get a label for Bernie back then. So I think that like it was just the nature of the market, and things, you know, are cyclical like that with artists. Like sometimes they are so sought after, then there's a lull for a while, and I think that we kind of hit like a little bit of the lull, at least for record making. But like people were still coming to the shows. So, you know, we kind of got our recording gear together and did it ourselves, and put out 2 kind of extended EPs, I would call them. One might be a full length. Yeah, I guess one's kind of a full length. Yeah, that was mostly recorded like kind of at our own places, and some of it was done at 4th Street Recording in Santa Monica, engineered by Spencer Guerra, who worked on the current Bernie project. He was one of the engineers who started kind of combing through a lot of this material we had.
So, okay, so like to take it to the way from the WOOniverse, playing together and kind of coming up with stuff on the spot, and occasionally people bringing up charts and stuff, where's this project kind of coming from? Are these like stuff that Bernie had recorded, or you guys had recorded and that were laying around, like, or sketches of ideas?
Way from the WOOniverse, I don't know where it came from. Judy Worrell found these tapes of unfinished Bernie material and had them digitized. And I was, so the way it kind of happened was, I guess Judy was trying to get her ducks in a row, and she was looking for a label, and she called me to ask if I knew of any labels. And I said, well, I have a modest label that like I'm kind of doing little things on. And she's like, well, will you be interested in the project? So, like, you know, you were part of this. And I said I had to think about it, because it was, first of all, like kind of an emotional thing. And I had distanced myself from a lot of the P-Funk stuff for a while, just, you know, just to have a change, and just because it was kind of still a little painful losing Bernie. And I thought about it, and I said, like, you know, I would like to be part of it and get involved. And she mailed me a hard drive of the material, and she and I started going through it with my engineer Spencer, and we just started kind of mapping out where the gaps were, where things weren't finished. And then with everyone involved, which is a really large team, we started building around Bernie, really, and kind of using a lot of the people involved. Actually, the majority of the people involved in this record had worked with Bernie very closely, so they knew Bernie's techniques, or what he liked, and how he would treat this or that, and that's why it was kind of a special album. You know, a lot of people have said to me that, like, you know, this really does sound like what Bernie would have done. And I'm like, I can only dream of that. You know, I don't really know exactly what, you know, his, precise vision would have been. But I think that we got pretty close to, you know, using a lot of his techniques and methods and ideas, and and working with what he left behind, because there was still a lot of intel in those files that I got that I think kind of suggested where certain things should be, or where he was going with certain things. Or I knew sometimes when he plays a certain part, it's like he would want that mimicked by the horns, or just little things like that from working with him, because I worked pretty closely towards the end as a co-producer with him, and sat just side by side with him mixing the records, and kind of always did that through my career with Bernie. So that's kind of how that started.
Well, I can't think of a more like rewarding and touching statement than this sounds like what he would have done for you. Like that's incredible. And I definitely, like, I don't have the insight that you do, but I do enjoy Bernie's music, and I think this record has been one of the coolest records and like most like well put together and moving all-star ensembles I think I've heard like this year. That's my opinion, but to get that compliment from people who knew him, like, I gotta imagine that's very fulfilling.
Yeah, it's really humbling. It really is.
Like, so when you got these, was the title there? Was like the through line kind of there, or were they just tracks?
They were just tracks with working titles. Yeah, there were two tracks that I didn't directly produce. It was What Have They Done With My Funk, which was produced by Michael Moon Rubin. That one had been mostly completed before I got involved in the project, and then there was When the Rain Subsides, that was produced by Will Calhoun, and that was finished before I joined the project. So, and then the rest of them, Distant Star was co-produced by, I think I mentioned him before, Jared Samuel Eliasaph, as well as Wave from the WOOniverse, and he wrote some really cool melodies and lyrics for that one too. So yeah, it was definitely a team effort. I guess the challenge for me is, wrangling the team and putting the team together, and then, being the one to make certain decisions as to where we're going to take it. Because I think that, like, at first when you get this much content, it's really overwhelming, and you're like, I don't know. Like, I had moments of being like, I don't know where this is going to go in the grand scheme. And then there's like a light bulb moment, and you're like, oh, this song can go here, and we just need to change this, and this, and then we have a moment. And that was fun, because some of the songs that I wrote off initially as just like, oh, we might shelve that, or like, we'll see about that. Like, I had light bulb moments, and then they ended up being some of my favorite songs. But those are always the special ones when you underestimate something, and it's something special, and
Like, which ones did you find that happening to?
I would say Soldiers of the Stars at first. I just kind of felt, it didn't have vocals, it basically just felt like a jam to me. And we built that one up and made it into something. And, Eric McFadden did a really great guitar solo, and we had Daru Jones come in and play drums, and that one just like transformed into like a track that I really loved. Also, Wave from the WOOniverse, the title track. Originally, I kind of heard like, all right, I got the track, and it was Bernie's keyboards to like a drum machine or something like that. And then I was like, I don't really know what to do with this. Like, this is okay. And then I was like, oh, this could be like a Tom Tom Club like feel. And then I laid down like a drum part, like and like doubled it with like Lindrum. And then on the bass, I played like 2 bass parts, one with a pick, one slap, and kind of got like a groove going, and then like suddenly it started feeling like something. And those were just very special moments when you kind of like transform something that you didn't really expect or almost neglected at one point, that's
it kind of sounds like something that would have happened in the orchestra, or it's an improv moment. Like it's an idea that everyone kind of, even though it was just a recording of it, the spontaneity of it, bringing it to life. That's really cool, man. One tune, there's so many cool songs on this record, but Transcendence is a burner, man. Can you tell me a little bit about how you got Mark and Norwood to come together on that track? Because that's like a Team Supreme lineup.
So that track, I think, was an outtake from something Bernie started with Bill Laswell. And it was labeled as, I think I got a screenshot of the reel, and the reel said has potential. And there were some drums on there and some percussion and stuff, and I was like, I want to kind of revamp this, kind of just get a whole different feel. So I hit up Adam Bradley Schreiber, the drummer. I don't know if you've seen him before play, but definitely look him up on Instagram. I love what he does with different colors and stuff. And I asked him to, lay down a groove with some metals and some rootsy kind of feel. And then once we kind of got that underway, Norwood came into my studio and just laid down this amazing bass part, and he just really blasted off with it. And it was cool because it was at 9 a.m. He wanted to record at 9 a.m, and that's really early for me. So he was recording, and we were hanging out, and it was just it was really organic. We're just trying different pedals, and ultimately we went with, I think, just kind of like a pretty natural bass tone with a little bit of an envelope filter on it. And that was kind of like the ticket with that one. And then I guess we kept building out the song. I brought in Greg Ellis, the percussionist, who he's done a lot of really cool film scores. I think he was on The Matrix and Iron Man, all these blockbusters. So he has this just ability to really build out percussion in this really interesting way. So when it really and he always I've actually studied with him before, and he talks about trancing out a lot, and he has a really great way of doing that and creating that feeling. And I had him come in towards the end of the song, and then we had all that, and I really wanted Mark to play on it, and I was just crossing my fingers that he would. And Mark and Bernie played together, so he said yes, and we met at Studio G, and Mark he did 2 takes, and he was using his like house keys on the strings to make like noise and doing all this stuff. And he had an electric sitar with him that he was like, getting some cool tones out of. And he just did like 2 passes and was like, yeah, I'm fine. And I'm like, yeah, we're all fine in this room. That was fucking great. It was amazing working with him. He was just such a sweet guy. So that Transcendence is definitely one of my my favorites to just like kind of zone out to. It's and it also shows a lot of like Bernie's classical chops in the beginning. It's kind of cool.
Well, so you said trancing out, right? Is what the I'm totally blanking on the composer's name. You and him would study with, right? Okay.
Yeah.
So what did that mean to him? Like, is that just learning how to vamp in the space, or is that creating like a kind of a soundscape?
Yeah, it's like creating a soundscape, and also getting very meditative about it. And what I studied when I was like much younger with him, before we became like colleagues, but he would set up a collection of drums from all different parts of the world and have me play them. And rather than thinking of like, oh, I have to use this technique on this drum because it's this formal training or this or whatever, to play them all together and to form like a kaleidoscopic sound that was very meditative, and to get into a zone where you're just so focused on it and you're playing, and you can just keep going and going and going and going. And I feel that like it really, like that sentiment that he's, I've actually seen some of his shows before. He's done shows where he has like just like all these instruments and he just plays like for like maybe like 45 minutes of just percussion, and it's like really moving. And I feel that he really knocked it out of the park with this one. But like, when I'm thinking about different percussionists for the record, there were like a number of people who came up and who have different skill sets. Like, Greg was great for that track, and he's great for a lot of things. And Steve Scales from Talking Heads and Tom Tom Club, and also Tina Turner, and the list goes on. He was great for the tracks that he was on. And then we had Mauro Rafosco, who plays with David Byrne. He was perfect for the track Greenpoint. I really loved what he did, because he did like kind of a live, that whole track was supposed to feel like you're in a club, like a live kind of thing going on. And he recorded it with, rather than overdubbing each little part, he came in with a setup and played it together. So it was like, a band playing. So each, that's kind of like when you're casting the record, it's like you're thinking of like what each person really does in a nuanced way. That's even though like, everyone's so talented and can do so much, but there's just certain people you think of for certain tracks.
Well, and just like to compose it in that way, to orchestrate it in that way, it's a whole like it's kind of like one of those like things that like you dream of doing. You know what I mean? Like, I want to get them to do that on that, and them to do, you know what I mean? That's like, in this, it's so cool that so many of these people had a relationship, even just if it's musically distant, with Bernie, to be like, yeah, I'm in on this project. And for you to be able to like just kind of think of this person and actually be able to pitch it and have them be into it,
Yeah. It was really cool, because like, I don't think that anyone declined unless they were completely out of town, or on tour or something. So it was really cool to have so many people so into the project and willing to honor Bernie.
It's definitely a beautiful honoring and beautiful, like, I don't want to say send off, but you know what I mean, the celebration.
Yeah.
Can you tell me about Watt, working with Watt? Because you worked with Watt. I mean, Watt's on this record with Pedro Wu, or Pedro Wu, and but did you worked with them outside this, right?
Yeah. I worked with him on a Black Flag reinterpretation or tribute. I call it reinterpretation record. A long time ago, when I first approached him, we did several songs together, and then he ended up playing. I kept in touch with him and kept inviting him to work with us in various capacities. So we did a show at the Bootleg Theater in LA where Watt was one of the guests, and we performed Maggot Brain with Watt and Lily Hayden, and we played the song Super Stupid too with Watt. And then Bernie Worrell Orchestra did a song with Watt called Double W. And that's kind of a fun one. I feel like there's definitely some like Watt-isms in there. And that was one of those things where we all got in a room, we were writing in the studio, and like on the spot, like the whole band happened to be in California from some tour dates or whatever. And we're like, okay, we have the day with Watt, let's make it happen. And I think that Watt was like, oh, these things make me nervous, like writing all together, like on the spot. But it worked out well. And Bernie and Watt, always got on really well. So, and actually, yeah, there's another project I was involved with Watt. This one never really took off, but we were supposed to. I had this idea of having a stripped down kind of thing of just having Bernie, Watt. I would play drums, and then I was kind of brainstorming guitarists, and I thought of Theresa Wayman from Warpaint joining, and we all discussed it, and we were actually going to go through this project until Bernie got sick.
That would have been so fucking sick.
Yeah, and it would have been amazing. And we tried it. We tried to still get together, and I think that it just like without having Bernie, we couldn't really get the same sentiment. And we still have like a lot of recordings and jams from those sessions. We went down to Pedro, and we were in his practice pad, and just tried a bunch of things out, just the three of us with Theresa. But I have some new stuff that I'm working on with Theresa that we're gonna disclose soon, and yeah, it would have been a really fun project, but that's what happens. Just
yeah, but I mean,
life happens.
Yeah, but still, that's so cool. That's what a cool idea. And everyone in on it. You know what I mean? Like, even though it didn't come to fruition, just to be like, these people that you're moved by, that hear them say yes to it. You know what I mean? Like, that's also something that's so, I gotta imagine is very rewarding, is to like, yeah, dude, that is a good idea. You know what I mean? From the people you listen to at the beginning, that, you know what I mean? That get behind your idea. Like,
yeah. It is really cool. Like, I would just call Watt and just like, hey, what are your thoughts on like, he's just like, Yeah, like of course, totally righteous, like or whatever. I'm not doing my best wall right now, but yeah, it was exciting at the time to have these possibilities with. I just feel that if Bernie was around for a few more years, he would have really gotten a little more attention and maybe label backing, maybe some better opportunities. I still believe that. I think that things were building, but then, as I said, life happens, and yeah.
Did while working with all these individuals and putting together these tracks and kind of getting to work with everyone to celebrate Bernie, did any I mean, I gotta imagine there was some a moving or just experiences these artists shared with you while doing this project that you may have never known unless being in a situation like this. Is there anything like that you can recall from working with anyone?
Yeah, there's something that just one little anecdote that I thought about a lot. Steve Scales told me, and he said that when they started with Talking Heads, people, journalists would always come after the show to talk to Bernie, and Bernie this was his most recent project from P-Funk, so he was still in the spotlight, and he would always grab Steve and bring him along with him when the journalists would come in and try to show him off too, and be like, well, here's Steve. And it just reminded me of how kind Bernie was, because he was always it's not about me, it's about us. And he was always trying to showcase everyone in the band in some way. Even the Trading Fours disaster, he really had faith in me that I was going to be able to to throw down. It's so it was very sweet, but yeah, it's everyone kind of had a story. It was interesting. Everyone had an encounter or a story, and yeah, there's yeah, I don't know, I'm just reflecting.
Yeah, no, and it's beautiful, and I think it's a wonderful celebration of his artistry and his musicality, and just your friend, and and I appreciate you being open to talking about it, because I know it's there's been time, but I don't think that ever fully heals. So I appreciate all these insights you've shared with this record, my friend.
Well, of course, yeah.
I guess one thing, and maybe this might be just my lack of knowledge of Parliament Funkadelic lore, but the idea of the woo, what exactly do you know what Bernie meant by? I gotta imagine you did, to be able to direct to kind of to get this throughout this record. But what is the woo?
That I've heard different versions of. One is I heard it was from George Clinton going woo 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 woo.
Okay.
when Bernie would play or solo or something like that. But I've heard different versions of with the WOOniverses, or with where Bernie came from. Or, the title of the record was established before I started on the project. His widow was pretty adamant that was going to be the name of it, and I guess it was supposed to be a wave from the WOOniverse. Was that he was returning? He had returned to the WOOniverse where he came from, and he's waving from there. I was actually confused when I first heard it. I was like, a wave, like, is it like a sound wave? And I was like,
Yeah.
I was like trying to like get my head around it, but I guess that's what you wanted it to be, and I was like, yeah, that's cool. If you feel strongly about that, we'll call it that. And yeah.
So with all it being wrapped up and available, what is her take on? I mean, I gotta imagine she was the final like say if this was done or not, right?
Yeah. Judy was very pleased. She had a lot of really nice and very kind things to say about the record. I think she felt really confident about it and happy with the direction of it, which meant the world to me.
I mean, that's the ultimate win with this whole project is if for her this could be the right way to send it to celebrate Bernie. That's beautiful, my friend.
Yeah.
Now I know this is one of your many projects that you do, and like I said, I appreciate you diving into it, and I it's a heavy subject for anyone who lost anybody to like dive into this and like make it a whole project like you've done, and like so like I am very appreciative of your insights into this.
Yeah, of course.
But I getting ready for this, I also dived into everything I can find on you, and I really like the tune Glendale Departure. Like I thought that arrangement in that tune was really cool and had some like Beach Boys Beatlesque like kind of voicings going on in some of the background stuff, and like so with that in mind, I wanted to ask you what you're doing next.
Yeah, I'm working on some more tunes of my own composition. That's what I've been doing this week. And I'm going to be working on some more in New York in August. And then I've been writing with Theresa Wayman from Warpaint, and we have a project together that's coming along really well, and that's what I'm particularly excited about. And we'll keep everyone updated on that. And yeah, various things, just producing some artists and kind of just keeping the studio afloat.
Yeah, that's I'm excited about the project with Theresa. That's going to be sick, man. When that's out, let's talk again about that record.
For sure.
But yeah, I got to imagine with how the world is with people's access to recording technology, that keeping a studio afloat is a difficult task. So I'm glad you are keeping it afloat.
Yeah, it definitely is a challenging time to be in that lane, especially. I mean, I respect all forms of recording for sure. I prefer analog recording. I've done most of my work on analog tape, but you can't always do that. But I think it's the studio biz is just kind of, it's challenging right now. There's like a new plugin out every day. There's new interface out every day. It's just like you're trying to keep up with like all these things, like, and also like maintain a really like welcoming environment for people, and not getting too wrapped up in like, this illusion of like, you never have everything that you need, or that everyone else has more people in their studio working than you do. And it's like the same Instagram, like poison, you know,
Yeah.
it's that kind of thing. But it's fine. And I'm really happy with, where things are at with the recording, at least on my end, you know, at least what I get to do. So,
I mean, you're doing it, man. You're working with like when you compare just friends who are just doing studios, but that, you know, what I mean, like that is the poison of it. Is like the Instagram is the instant comparison of, oh crap, they're working, oh shit, you know what I mean? Like it's so easy to get caught in that cycle and not like to be taken away from all the amazing access in your life to what you're doing, you know. At least for me, that's what I find. I should say that. I find that, and always having to remind myself of that same thing. Like, oh, step away from this, you know? Like,
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
But, well, Evan, thank you so much for chatting with me, man. I really appreciate this. It's been very inspiring.
Thank you for having me.
And like I said, when you're doing this next record, or if you're ever coming through Cleveland, please hit me up. And I guess, okay, maybe we should end it on this. If one thing from like working with Bernie for as long as you had that you find yourself doing, and maybe we circled past this, but I guess like a lesson from Bernie that you still find yourself utilizing today, would you be able to recall one?
Yeah, step away from music, everyone.
Yeah,
and enjoy nature.
Okay. And is that something you guys would do? Just go hang out and walk in parks, or is that something he just would do by himself?
Yeah, he was very in line with Mother Earth, and he really valued that space and that time, and as much as we love music and we want to be around it all the time, it's like sometimes you need to get out. Yeah, go to a park. Like, just get out. Like, get some fresh air. You know, like it's that's essentially. He used to record birds on a field recorder and analyze their calls, and he was very dialed into that part of existence,
which makes sense of that opening track on this record.
Yeah, that was a tribute to that. Yeah,
and like that's the most musician getaway. Let me analyze these birds. But that's beautiful, man. Evan, thank you so much for chatting with me, man.
Yeah, thanks for having me. I really appreciate it.
Yo, Spike Spiegel here. You just listened to Zig at the Gig podcast. Keep riding the bebop. See you, Space Cowboy. Bang.